I was driving my delivery van back from a small out-of-town delivery one night. It was somewhere around 11 p.m. and it was raining steadily outside. I didn't usually work this late, but every once in a while there would need to be a delivery made after store hours, so past 10 p.m. The stores I delivered to are spread out, so most of the driving is on long highways with nothing interesting to see. As I went along the road, I saw headlights up ahead. Although going the speed limit, I caught up to them quickly. It was an old pickup truck driving really slow in front of me. It was as if they were scared of slipping on the wet road, but they were going way too slow for it to be practical. After a minute, I was getting impatient and started looking for a chance to go around them. I sped up a little bit, putting on my turn signal so they knew what I was doing, but just before I made my move, their truck suddenly lost control and ran off the road. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over. I stayed in my van, looking out the side window. They somehow barely missed a few trees, but they were down a slope and likely stuck. Even though it wasn't my fault at all, I felt really bad and couldn't just leave them without at least calling for help. I tried dialing 911, but there was no signal at all. After a minute of not seeing any movement by the truck, I got even more nervous and got out of my van to check on them. I walked down the side of the road, through the cold rain, and carefully walked down the slope until I reached the trees. The truck was wedged in some bushes, but didn't seem to be too damaged. I approached the driver's side door. The window was fogged over, and I couldn't see inside. I knocked, then opened the door. There was a man sitting in the driver's seat, frantically trying to get the truck to turn on.
"Hey, are you okay? Did you want some help?"
I asked. He looked up at me, not saying a word for a few seconds. Then he responded.
"Can you give me a ride?"
I told him I could take him to the nearest gas station so he could call for help, but that's as far as I could go. After some thinking, he agreed to it. He stepped out and I led the way back to my van. Despite the rain, he walked slowly and seemed to watch my every move. Every time I looked back, he was just looking me in the eyes until I turned my head away. It creeped me out, but maybe he was just trying to make sure that I wasn't creepy myself. We both got inside and I started driving. I really didn't know how close the nearest gas station was, but I was sure it had to be at most 50 to 60 miles out. The first few minutes I tried to make some small talk, but the man didn't really respond. I thought maybe his head was hurting from the crash, but either way, it made things really awkward. Every once in a while, I'd look over and the man would be staring at me, not smiling or frowning, just staring. I was starting to wonder who this man was that I picked up. I felt like any normal person would be grateful for my help after getting stranded in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully, not long into the drive, I saw the lights of a small town up ahead. But as we got closer, the man only started acting more strange. He was looking around a lot, both inside the car and outside the windows. When I pulled into the gas station, I parked the van and asked if he needed help with anything else. He didn't answer, but I felt tension as if he was contemplating something. I tried to break the silence.
"Okay, well, I'm gonna get back on the road then."
The man took one more look around, then suddenly forced his body over, shoving me against the door aggressively. He started punching me as I opened the door and tried to get out, but just then, the passenger door swung open and the man was pulled away from me. I was trying to catch my breath, still not sure what happened until I got out of the van. There were 2 police cars and some officers holding the man down. They denied giving me all the details, but apparently the man was running away from a serious crime in a stolen truck. Once an officer found the truck crashed on the side of the road, they called in to have some other officers stake out at the gas station and wait for him. They didn't know he was with me when I pulled in, but once they saw me getting attacked, they jumped in to help. I don't know if he attacked me in an effort to steal my van, or if it was because he saw the police cars and thought I'd taken him in. But either way, it was a horrifying experience. I knew the man was creepy, but I had no idea how much danger I truly was in. If those police officers weren't waiting at the gas station, I don't know if I'd be here right now. This happened to me last year. I worked at a gas station, which I know is very typical for these sorts of things, but when you actually work there, you never really expect anything to happen to you. This night, it was raining outside. Not too heavily, but enough to make it uncomfortable to be outside without any sort of covering. In weather like this, there's a lot less people coming into the convenience store to grab snacks or pay for gas with cash, so my job is to just be there. I'd occasionally walk around the store to stretch my legs and stay awake, but I'd spend most of my time on my phone. As I was looking through my social media feeds, I suddenly heard a strange noise coming from outside. It sounded like someone was tapping on the glass door. I looked up from my phone and saw a figure standing outside in the rain. It was a man, his face hidden by the hood of his jacket. I waved, showing he could just walk in and that the door wasn't locked. He didn't move though. He just kept tapping on the door as if he didn't see me. I walked over and pulled the door open, greeting him. He didn't look at me, but walked right past me and over to the counter. It was almost comical in my head how oblivious this guy was. I went back around the counter and the man asked for a pack of cigarettes, then paid with cash. He walked out, and that's when I looked out the window and noticed there were no cars in the parking section or by the gas pumps. The man walked off until he reached the road, then continued walking along the shoulder, through the rain like it was nothing. I would have been a lot less confused if he had bought a gas container or something, assuming his car ran out down the road, or even broke down, but he just got a pack of smokes and left. With nothing better to do, that's all I thought about over the next hour. It was just such an odd thing. I came to no further sensible conclusions though, and ended up stocking some items to continue passing the time. While doing so, I heard someone tapping on the door again. I walked around the aisle and saw that same man standing outside. I walked over and opened the door.
Are you alright?
I asked. He didn't respond.
You can borrow the phone if you need.
I said, trying to offer any assistance.
Down the road,
he said. I peeked my head out and tried looking, but saw nothing in the distance. But then my gaze fell on a gas container sitting by one of the pumps. He pointed at it and said help, which was when I realized he probably didn't speak much English. I said sure and walked out to the pump with him. He handed me a credit card and I started pumping the gas into the container. The man was standing behind me like he was trying to stay out of my view, which made me uncomfortable. Once the container was full, I quickly handed it over and started walking back, but the guy stopped me, grabbing my arm. He started speaking quickly, but I couldn't understand him. I pulled away and started walking back to the doors, but then he yelled something, like he was talking to someone else. And just as I reached the door, I saw a man on the other side of the counter shoving everything into his backpack. He looked up at me and instantly jumped over the counter, but then everything went black. I woke up laying on the floor with a massive headache. It seemed to only be a couple minutes after the incident, and I almost immediately realized that the guy behind me had hit me over the head in an effort to help his buddy escape. I got the cops over and they took me to the hospital, but I had no serious injuries aside from a concussion and needing a few stitches. The worst part of it all is the embarrassment I felt afterwards, like I'd been played so easily and let them get away with it. Honestly though, I'm thankful that I got hit over the head and blacked out before anything else happened, because the CCTV footage showed the guy inside holding a gun. If I had tried to stop him, or even shown I was a threat in any way, I could have been put down and never woken up. My roommate was out of the house for the week, so I had the place to myself. It was spring break, so my college classes were out too. I had no plans, and really nothing I needed to do. On Monday, I was basically trapped inside due to a huge storm blowing through our city. This was common around this time of year, but it still always seems worse every time it happens. The trees looked like they were gonna blow away, and the house would shake and creak non-stop. Knowing I wouldn't be able to sleep, I decided to just stay up. I turned on the Xbox and started up one of my video games. I played for well over an hour, probably until 11 o'clock, when the doorbell rang. I paused the game and got up, but then I remembered the whole storm and everything. Who would be outside right now? I went over to the front door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. I opened the door. The wind and water hit me right away, but when I looked around, I didn't see anyone. I closed the door and thought maybe the wind had somehow rang the doorbell. I don't know, it sounds dumb now, but what was I supposed to think? I went back to my game, but only a couple minutes later, I heard a huge crash in the backyard. Stuff tumbling over and breaking. I immediately knew it was our patio furniture and ran over to the back door. Everything was scattered around the yard, blowing around in the wind. I quickly put on my shoes and went outside. I started pushing each piece of the furniture up against the back of the house. The wind was so heavy, it would even hurt sometimes when the water would hit my face. I was rushing, going as fast as I could, until I saw someone. They were standing at the edge of the backyard, watching me. I looked back at them for a moment, but then grabbed the last piece of furniture and ran inside to escape the rain. I looked out the back door as I dried off, but the person was gone. Between that and the doorbell ringing, I was a little bit nervous. I sat in the living room, this time just scrolling on my phone because I was tired of being interrupted. After a while, I struggled to keep my eyes open. I got a blanket and laid down on the couch. I didn't feel like going upstairs, and the storm was much louder up there anyway. It took a while, but eventually, I drifted into sleep. A few hours later, still well into the night, I woke up from a sudden burst of heavy wind outside, shaking the house. I pulled the blanket to the side and sat up, moving my feet to the floor as I prepared to go check if the furniture outside was still there. But just when my feet touched the floor, they were soaked. It woke me up immediately. I looked down and saw a puddle on the ground right next to the couch. Then I saw another and another, leading in a line across the floor. Inside the puddles were faint, muddy shoe prints. I stood up and ran to the corner of the room, heart beating rapidly in my chest. After a minute of hearing nothing but the wind outside, I slowly followed the shoe prints. They led all throughout the house, upstairs and downstairs, but I could clearly tell that they entered through the back door, which I had stupidly forgotten to lock in the rush of getting out of the rain. I locked it and pulled my phone out to call 911, but then the thought crept into my mind, what if they're still inside? I stayed quiet and moved into the corner of the house where I felt the most hidden, then called. I waited in silence for them to arrive. When they did, they took a look around, seeing everything I saw, but nothing more. They told me it seemed like a personal attack though, because nothing was missing and they were clearly focused on my house in particular. However, they walked right up to me while I was sleeping and seemingly did nothing but watch me, which is super creepy, but doesn't make much sense. If they wanted to do something to me, they would've at that moment. After some thought, this had led me to believe that whoever it was had actually come for my roommate. They saw me, then looked around the whole house, and then left, doing absolutely nothing. So if this was a personal attack, and my roommate was there, I think things may have gone a lot worse than they had.